Hi, and thank you for coming to see our presentation, Trends in OER Adoption and Awareness in U.S. K-12 Classrooms. This is a pre-recorded talk for the Open Ed 2023 conference. And so to get started, we'll go over a little background of both myself and the project before jumping into our actual results. And so first, I'm Julia Seaman, the Director of Research at Bayview Analytics, and my co-author for the presentation is Jeff Seaman, the Director at Bayview. So Bayview Analytics is a survey consulting statistical research firm. We've been around for almost 2 decades of research, and we really specialize in surveying and statistical analysis, especially within education itself. And so one of our major projects has been what I'll be talking to you about today, and that is our survey on OER awareness. And this started as a project specifically in higher ed in 2009, and then expanded to K-12 in 2017. And so we've been doing these surveys almost annually, and they've been a great way for us to track and monitor OER awareness and use and adoption in the classrooms across the US. And so most recently, we've had our 2022-2023 report just released in September 6th. The report is free for anyone to look at and download at our website, bayviewanalytics.com/OER, along with all of our past reports too. This project does have one planned report still to go for the 2023-2024 academic year, with results to come out in about a year. And then we hope for many future reports as well. And so this project really has one main goal, and that's to understand the role of OER. And that's the role of OER both in higher education and K-12, and more specifically to quantify perceptions and awareness of OER, and including things that are correlated with that, such as open licensing like Creative Commons, and then other things that can come with the use or adoption or come before the use of adoption of OER, such as the use of digital materials in the school and how those materials are reviewed and adopted and implemented. The main respondents from our survey are faculty and teachers, and we also survey administrators and chief academic officers for their perspectives as well. These surveys aim to be nationally representative, so we generally have 49 to 50 states plus the District of Columbia as our respondents every year. And we also make sure that the respondents are representative from the type of institution. So whether it's very large or very small, and such as those measures as well, to make sure that we are sort of analyzing the full, all the classrooms in the US and for us. And so we wouldn't be able to do this project without the support from the sponsors you see on the bottom, especially our main sponsor, the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. So to go on and jump into the results. So first, I want to set the stage for how K-12 classrooms really, what they were like in the 2022-23 school year, along with their digital use and perceptions from the teachers there. So first to start, one of the biggest things we want to know is, are those students back in the classroom? And so what we see is that K-12 classrooms are almost all in person. We saw that 92% of all teachers reported teaching everything as all in person. They did no remote, no hybrid teaching at all. While we had a very small percentage, that 8%, who did some remote. And that could be anywhere from a few classes that were done remotely, digitally means, to a full remote classroom for the entire school year, or just one student or the whole classroom. So it's a wide variety of different remote techniques, but still a very, very small percentage of teachers who respond that they did that, which corresponds to a very small percentage of students who are doing remote instruction during the school year. One thing to note is that when we look at our year-by-year data, is that we saw that the return to the classroom following the pandemic, the 2020-2021 school year, that top line, and then the next year we saw was a very quick, almost universal return to the classroom. It wasn't a gradual, some classrooms waited. It was they were remote during the pandemic, if they went remote, and then they were back to person if they were going to go back to in person. So for almost all the classrooms that are in our survey, they were almost all back to in person in 2021. So now that we know that our students are being taught in the classroom, we're wondering what kind of materials are they using, because just because they're in person doesn't mean they're not using digital tools and materials. And so one of the biggest things to look at for us is the use of textbooks. And so first and foremost, we asked if the teacher requires a textbook. And so we saw that 72% of K-12 teachers do require a textbook for their classrooms. And then we asked them to respond what format are offered to students. And so was it digital only, print only, or were both formats offered? And really interestingly, we say the largest group, 56%, that red bar, are offering their textbook in both formats to their students. And so that's the largest group that's being offered right now. And then also very interesting to us is that digital and print are offered sort of at equal proportion. So if you count digital only plus those are offered in both formats, it's 77%. And while it's print only, it's 79%. So it's sort of an equal balance of those that are able to get a textbook in digital versus those who are able to get a textbook in print. One thing to note is that we did ask this question in the last year as well. And so what we see this year is there's been a 9% drop in the number of teachers that are offering print only, mostly in favor to offering both formats. So there's actually been a decrease in the number of print only to shifting towards a slightly more digital option available for the textbook. And so another thing we like to look at is the teacher's personal preferences around their formats, around digital versus print. And so what we've done is we've had them answer their agreement on 3 statements. And so the statements are, I prefer print materials over digital for teaching. My students prefer print materials over digital, and students learn better from print materials than they do from digital. And so one thing to note is that any teacher that agrees with these statements is leaning towards preferring print, while vice versa, any teacher that's disagreeing with these statements is leaning towards a preference for digital. And so going into the results, we see that for that first statement, I prefer print materials over digital for teaching. The majority of them teachers do agree, and that just 1 in 5 teachers, that 20%, prefer digital materials. And so there's a large number of teachers that prefer print materials, 57, just over the majority. And so just under that majority, either don't have a strong preference or prefer digital. So print is winning for that teacher preference. If we look into their responses for their student preference, so my students prefer print materials over digital, we see that it's slightly a small amount shifted towards a preference for digital. There's still overwhelmingly preference for print. So 50% of their teachers say that their students prefer print over digital. And now it's 1 in 4 teachers saying that their students prefer digital versus that 1 in 5 saying that the teacher themselves prefers digital. One thing to note here is that this is the teacher responding about their student format preferences, not necessarily the students' preferences themselves. But we do see that the teachers think the students lean slightly more digital than the teachers do themselves. And so we also know that formats themselves may not be as related to the actual outcomes, which would be learning. And so we asked the teachers to say whether they agree students learn better from print materials than they do digital. And what we see is for the largest number of agreement, 58% of teachers do agree that students learn better from print than they do digital. And the smallest number disagree, that's 17%. Granted, these are all very similar, so there's a sort of similar trend of teachers saying that similar number of teachers saying that they prefer print, their students also prefer print, and that students learn better from print. So these also track together. But what is interesting is that we can actually look between the individual answers given from these teachers. So like I mentioned, there is a large preference for print. It's at least 50% for any of the agreement levels that we saw for those 3 statements. And that number has been very similar to the prior years we've asked this question. But comparing the responses between questions, we see some interesting things. And so first is 62% of teachers believe they agree with their own students on the preferences. So what we see is 49% of teachers saying that they both prefer print. So both the teacher prefers print and the teacher is saying their students prefer print. So they are matched together, as well as 13% saying that they prefer digital and their students prefer digital. But that does mean that there's a group of teachers who say they disagree with their students, and that's 11.5% of teachers. And so it's interesting, though maybe not unexpected, that the largest number of that, 8%, are saying that the teacher is preferring print, but their students are preferring digital. So that's the biggest divide that we see. But there's also a 3% number of teachers who say that they prefer digital and their students actually prefer print. So we do overall, so staying the same, we have schools are back to being in person, but that doesn't mean necessarily that they're back to fully physical media, print media. We see a wide use of digital textbooks, and if you look in the report, we have other reports that there's use of other digital tools as well in the classroom. And however, we do know that even though there's this wide increase in digital tools, that a lot of teachers actually believe and still want to use this print materials and think that their students do as well. So with that, I'll move into our responses on OER awareness and OER use. And so first, going to step back a little bit about and describe how we actually survey this in our survey. And so first thing we do is we do include our definitions for OER, Open Education Resources, Public Domain, and Creative Commons in the survey. These are definitions mainly taken and adapted from the Hewlett Foundation, and they have been definitions that we've kept in our surveys questions year over year. So we're able to connect and compare our data from year over year to look at the trends that we see. So this is the actual screenshot from our most recent survey. And so we asked teachers and administrators as well, how aware are you of open education resources? And then give them a list of possible levels of awareness: not aware, heard of, somewhat aware, aware, or very aware. However, can we trust these responses? Can we trust the true response to the raw results that come out of this? And so short answer, not really. And this is due to the fact that OER, in its name, the open education of resources, that open side that gets confused a lot by teachers who think that maybe anything that's open, anything that's sort of free and available and digital counts as OER, while OER itself is a little more restrictive and specific. And so what we actually do is we require awareness of Creative Commons as well as awareness of OER, with the idea that if someone's aware of OER, they should also be aware of how it can be implemented and its licensing specifics, which are a very unique aspect of OER compared to traditional commercial materials. And so we do require for someone to be aware of OER that they also are aware of Creative Commons. And this creates what we call a strict level of OER awareness. The sort of net product is that we do lose a few numbers of people saying that they are aware of OER because they are not aware of Creative Commons, but we have very high confidence in the numbers that are remaining in our strict OER awareness, especially high confidence for comparing year over year. So that's the measure that I'll be showing you today. So the 2023 level of K-12 OER awareness is shown here. It does remain low, so just over 1 in 4 teachers, 28%, are aware at some level. And so we count that as teachers saying that they're aware, somewhat aware, aware, or very aware. It's sort of how we combine all to a single number of awareness. And then there's an additional 12% of teachers, maybe 1 in 10, who have some name recognition of OER, but don't know that much. But that does leave the vast majority of teachers, 60%, who are not aware of OER and have never heard of it in K-12. And so this level of awareness is actually slightly increased over last year, though it is the same level of awareness we were measuring pre-pandemic. And so what I'm showing is our year-over-year OER awareness starting from pre-pandemic all the way through pandemic last year, so that the first post-pandemic time, and then this year. And so what you can see is that we did see a drop in awareness last year, but it's now back up, that 28% is back up to what we were measuring pre-pandemic as well. Corresponding with this, we did also see that there's a increase in the use of OER materials, OER as a required material in the classroom by 6%. And what is actually sort of most interesting to us is that while that 28% of awareness from this year is very similar to prior years, that blue bar, that very aware category, is actually slightly higher, which means that there may not be, while overall awareness is not growing, those who are aware of OER became more aware, deeper aware of it. So they became sort of somewhat aware, they might know it, might be able to describe it, to maybe they're actually using it or implemented it or looked into using it as well. We were able to look through our responses this year to see if there were any sort of demographics of the teachers or schools that really might be associated with OER awareness. And so one thing that we see is that for K-12 schools, that OER awareness is highly correlated to grade level that the teacher teaches. So there's really a distinct sort of pre-K to 5th grade elementary school versus that middle school and high school 6th to 12th grade, where if you are in elementary school, the teachers are much less likely to be aware of OER, versus if you're in that high school level, they're much more likely. So it's about 1 in 5, just under 1 in 5 elementary school to almost 1 in 3 in middle school and high school. And so the other thing is that we saw, we asked those teachers if they have provided any instruction with online. And so this is looking at those small percentage of teachers who have online experience. And we see that that is also correlated much more with being aware of OER materials. Both of these trends might be intuitive due to the, if you think about OER and what they are, so OER textbooks, OER is an online digital experience, an online tool, maybe are more likely to be used with teachers who are teaching online, or might more likely to be used in classrooms that would have textbooks such as those in middle school and high school compared to like a kindergarten classroom. The other thing we looked at to see if there's any regional differences. And so this is broad regions. And so you can see how the states were grouped in our data set. And so what we saw most is that that central to the middle of the country purple area, as well as the western country, the West Coast, were really much more likely to know about OER compared to the rest of the country. However, there weren't many differences, and there's no specific region that had very low awareness of OER. So to sort of put it all together, what we saw was OER awareness returned to the pre-pandemic level, 28% after a small drop last year. And then we also see OER awareness is associated with teachers who teach partially or fully online in higher grade levels, and slightly more associated with teachers in the central or western states. So in the full conclusion, I also wanted to show sort of the full state of OER awareness, which now includes higher education on this graph. And as you may or may not be aware, OER awareness and OER use is much higher in higher education. So while I said elementary school was about 1 in 5 teachers, high school and middle school is about 1 in 3 teachers. If we look at higher education, that's 2 in 3 teachers. So it's almost double the awareness level in higher education, and that also corresponds to a much higher level of use of OER as well. But there is OER awareness throughout K-12 grades, and we also see that this OER awareness is either similar or increasing in our most recent data set. But that does leave a lot of questions, especially for questions of the future of OER in K-12. We do definitely wonder, can OER awareness grow in K-12? How does this OER use across different grades and disciplines? As I showed you, OER awareness varies by different grades. So we might assume that it could be used differently in different grades. And then also, like I mentioned, OER awareness and use, as well as the use of digital tools, is much higher in higher education and much higher in colleges. So there's a question about that. How can the teachers in K-12, especially the teachers in high school, prepare their students to succeed with digital courseware, including the use of OER in higher education? How can they prepare their 12th graders who are going to be entering college to move from that primarily print use of tools in the classroom to a primarily digital use of tools? So many of these questions we're hoping to sort of track and follow over the years, but we're also very open to suggestions of questions and comments from anyone as well. Please, if you have any questions, reach out to us directly. I'm Julia at bayviewanalytics.com. We also have a mailing list if you're interested. So if you want to be notified of any of our new report releases, including this OER awareness report, as well as other educational reports, you can sign up for our mailing list on our website, and then as well as download everything. But a big thank you, and I hope everyone has a great day.